Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. I am your host John, and today here on the channel we're going to be talking about Silverado and its brand new Sony 4K steelbook that just came out. But before we get into that 4K Blu-ray review, I always like to give a quick film review, and today is no different. So if you don't want to know anything about the film Silverado and you're just here for that 4K Blu-ray review, you guys can skip ahead right now. So back on July 10th, 1985, the world was introduced to the film Silverado, which is written, directed, and produced by Lawrence Kasdan. The film is actually co-written by Lawrence Kasdan and his brother Mark Kasdan. You know, they grew up watching westerns, were a big fan of westerns, so they thought it'd be fun to get together and write this movie together as a love letter to those westerns that they grew up loving. And you can clearly tell while watching this movie, it is a love letter to those old-timey westerns. But it's got that 1980s twist on it, that 1980s tone on it. A lot of actors who are big in the 1980s. Lawrence Kasdan, if you don't know that name, he is a very famous writer. He's the guy who wrote The Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He also directed one of my personal favorite movies, The Big Chill. If you've never seen that movie, I could highly recommend that. So he's a pretty big name. Silverado came out in the 1980s where the Western was pretty much considered dead. There weren't that many Westerns that came out in the 1980s. There's this, Pale Rider, Young Guns was a big one in the 1980s, but they weren't really that successful. But this movie was pretty successful because it had a lot of big names behind it. Also, again, having Lawrence Kasdan in the director's chair, that's a pretty big deal. It was released by Columbia Pictures. The stars of this movie, my God, from top to bottom, even the small roles are filled by some pretty big names. Our leads, though, are Scott Glenn, Kevin Costner, Kevin Kline, Danny Glover, the main antagonist in this villain, giving one of his best performance and is just charming as hell and is one of our underappreciated actors. Brian Dennehy just chewing up scenery every time he's on screen. I absolutely love it. You also get Rosanna Arquette, Linda Hunt. If you don't recognize that name, she's the principal from Kindergarten Cop. I always love seeing her pop up. She's always so charming as well. She always plays like these very strong, independent characters. You know, I just always love seeing her pop up. John Cleese is in this movie. Not enough John Cleese in this movie. He's very early in the film, and he is fantastic as well. Jeff Goldblum pops up in a small role. That kind of makes sense because of The Big Chill. He's in that. And the reason why Kevin Costner is in this movie, believe it or not, if you've seen The Big Chill, he's actually the character of Alex, who, you know, the reason why everybody's coming to this funeral at the beginning of the movie and, like, getting the old band back together in The Big Chill is because his character, Alex, recently killed himself. So he's the guy in the casket, but you do not see Kevin Costner in that movie. All the flashbacks to his character were cut out. So Lawrence Kasdan kind of made it up to him with this movie, cast him in this movie. And this is really before Kevin Costner blew up and became this big-time actor, which is funny because Scott Glenn said that he kept calling him movie star in the film because he just knew that Kevin Costner was going to become one of the biggest A-listers of all time. And in the late 1980s and early 1990s, you could argue that Kevin Costner was the biggest actor at the time, and also he became a great director. But in this movie, Kevin Costner's character, you know, it's not the usual Kevin Costner character, and honestly, it's not the most focused of the characters in this film. It starts off pretty simply with Scott Glenn getting attacked by three guys attack him, and he fights them off. He takes their horses, and then that's when he stumbles upon Kevin Kline. Lets him borrow one of the horses. Kevin Kline himself, he's just wearing like long johns and everything. Like he's got nothing left because he had just been robbed. Kevin Kline also was in The Big Chill. Kevin Kline is one of our great actors as well. Academy Award winning actor, I believe, for A Fish Called Wanda, but he's always been a fantastic actor, and he brings his charm and his intelligence to this movie because when we stumble upon him, he's got nothing left, but his attitude is still really good. Scott Glenn seems a little bit more bitter, and I would say that he's probably giving the more serious acting performance in this movie because his character, he went away for 5 years basically for defending himself. So you can see that bitterness is like all throughout his character in this movie. And the two of them, they're going to go to another town, and that's where they're going to have to spring Kevin Costner because they thought they were just going to be meeting Kevin Costner, but Kevin Costner got himself locked up. He's going to get hanged the next day, so it becomes a whole thing. They got to get him out of there. This is also where we first meet Mel, played by the great Danny Glover 2 years before. He would, get his most iconic role in Lethal Weapon, but I think it's 1 year after Witness. So at this point, I think most people kind of consider him a villain, but he's kind of playing this very charming, nice guy who, unfortunately, because he's a black man in the Old West, the racists come out and they don't want him in their town, John Cleese, even though the bartender, he knows the racist. John Cleese's like, well, you kind of got to go too, just because we can't have this in my town. So unfortunately, you know, the racism gets him out of the town, but he ends up joining forces with Scott Glenn, Kevin Costner, Kevin Kline. The four of them, they're going to go riding off into Silverado. Before they get there, they go their separate ways. They got to meet up with family. Kevin Kline's got to go meet up with Rosanna Arquette. They get into Silverado, and that's when we find out Brian Dennehy, who used to ride with Kevin Kline, he's the sheriff of this town. He also owns a saloon in town, and that's where we get introduced to the Linda Hunt character. She's one of the people running it. Kevin Kline's going to end up also, you know, running the gambling section of this, and the two of them, they're going to run this for Brian Dennehy. Brian Dennehy, you know, he really likes the Kevin Kline character, but something happened with a dog back in the day, and basically what it's trying to tell you is that Kevin Kline, he's got a little bit more of empathy and compassion compared to the Brian Dennehy character. Brian Dennehy's trying to get ahead. He's trying to make his life as easy as possible while getting rich, you know. He's the sheriff, but he does some pretty dirty, shady shit. So that's kind of really the plot of this movie is, of course, we're going to have our classic Western plot where the good guys are going to be taking on the bad guys, but they really flesh out all of these characters in this movie. And what really helps this movie to stand out against other Westerns is it's a lot of fun. It's very much a 1980s Western. It's a love letter to all of those 1940s, 50s, and 60s Westerns that clearly Lawrence Kasdan and Mark Kasdan grew up watching. I mean, once we get through all the bad guys and we end up with our big final duel of Brian Dennehy and Kevin Kline at the end of this movie, it's shot like an old Western. It, you know, the way they have the camera in the distance, there's nobody around. They set up this old Western town. They filmed this whole thing in New Mexico, and it's just the perfect way to end the film. And again, all the acting in this movie is just fun. Everybody kind of knew what movie they were in. They're having a good time. The only one who seems like they're not really having a great time is Scott Glenn, even though he was. I just think that his performance, he was going for like that kind of anger underneath it all, whereas everyone else, you know, there might be some anger underneath it, but you know, everyone's just having a good time, having a lot of fun. The score is big. There's a lot of long shots of just like them riding and everything like that. Some big crane shots. It's just a beautiful looking movie, a beautiful sounding movie. It's just a really fun Western. Do I put it in the upper echelon of Westerns? No, I wouldn't do that. If it was going to creep into my top 10, it would be like really at the bottom, but more than likely this would fall in like that 11 to 15 range. It's one that I'll go back to if like I'm in the mood for a Western, but I'm not in the mood for like, you know, a really serious Western. I might throw on Silverado. I still really enjoy it. I'm watching this movie with a shit-eating grin on my face. I think it's fantastic. Again, it's just not one of the all-time greats, but that's a tough mountain to climb. But anyway, we're also here today to talk about the brand new 4K Steelbook that just came out from Sony. And here it is, Silverado on 4K Steelbook. And, you know, this is what Sony's been doing lately. This is released under the Columbia Pictures brand. It's a really nice looking 4K Steelbook. I personally really like it. You know, it's got that very glossy finish. I would have liked a little bit of matte in there, but it's fine. It did come with a digital code. You also get the previously released Blu-ray right there and the brand new 4K Blu-ray. All your extras are on that previously released Blu-ray, except for one. The trailer is on the new 4K Blu-ray. Very strange that they would do that. Maybe they thought someone's going to check out the trailer before they watch the 4K. I'm not entirely sure, but there are no new extras, so all your extras that are on the previously released Blu-ray that came out in 2009, you're getting nothing new. There's a 37-minute making of on there, which is pretty good. I enjoyed that. But other than that, there's a commentary track and a couple other little featurettes, but that is it. Also the trailer, of course, but that's really it. But you're really here to find out about that upgrade, because the old audio track was Dolby True HD 5.1, and now we're getting a brand new Dolby Atmos track. We're also upgrading the visuals to HDR10 and Dolby Vision. And man, all of it shows on the screen and all of it just sounds amazing. This is one of the best Dolby Atmos tracks of 2025. Bar none. And I was warned that this was going to be a really good Dolby Atmos track, but you can hear things coming from everywhere. Like, this is making great use of all of your channels. You know, you hear things above you, you hear things behind you. Obviously, this movie is labeled a Western action film. There's a lot of great action sequences in here, a lot of great shootouts. So, of course, you want the audio to sound great. Oh, I was talking about the score and how good the score is. I mean, this is an audio lover's dream. You're going to have a fantastic time with this Dolby Atmos track, and it's a really big jump from that Dolby True HD 5.1 from 16 years ago. So you're definitely going to notice that. And then the visuals on the previously released Blu-ray aren't that bad because it is a Sony Blu-ray, so Sony used to do a good job on their Blu-rays as well. That's something that carried over to 4K. They just know how to put out good physical media, so you might not think it's the world's biggest jump to 4K Blu-ray, but the 4K Blu-ray, the visuals are fantastic. Now, I won't say that they're 10 out of 10 visuals. We've gotten very spoiled this year, and we've gotten very spoiled with Westerns on 4K Blu-ray this year. You know, we got Pale Rider. We got The Outlaw Josie Wells on 4K Blu-ray. We got Shane on 4K Blu-ray. I can't say that this is better than The Outlaw Josie Wells or Pale Rider as far as 4K Blu-rays go. I gave those 10 out of 10s for their visuals. I would say that this is more like a 9, 9.5 out of 10. Still a noticeable upgrade. Still looks fantastic on 4K Blu-ray. You know, I was watching this at the same time I'm watching the Nightmare on Elm Street 4K collection, and I would actually say that the visuals on like a Nightmare on Elm Street parts 4 and 5 are probably better than the visuals here on Silverado, given very different films. You know, that one saw shot mostly on sets. You know, they're trying to create those big dream sequences. They shot this on location in New Mexico. So different kind of film, different kind of techniques shooting the film. But, you know, just to the naked eye, you might be like, yeah, it looks like that one's a little bit better than Silverado. And if you were to compare this side by side with like The Outlaw Josie Wells or Pale Rider, if you were to take the Pepsi challenge, I'm going to say that those both would come out on top in the visual department in comparison to this. But again, we've just gotten so spoiled this year. This is another fantastic 4K Blu-ray, another fantastic 4K Blu-ray from Sony. If I was going to give this one a score of 1 to 10, I'm going to give this one a pretty damn solid 9 out of 10. Now, one thing I want to talk about before I get out of here is the price of this, because it's about $40. They usually sell out these 4K steelbooks that Sony's been releasing, and they don't, at least here in the United States, give us a standard release, and they don't even do it like sometime down the line like say Paramount does. Like they release something in the Paramount Presents line, and then later it gets a regular standard edition that, you know, is fine as long as it eventually comes. Now, I haven't been seeing Sony do this. Like La Femme Nikita came out last year on 4K steelbook. That never got a standard release, so I don't know if Silverado will ever get that. That's actually one big reason why I made sure to get this 4K Blu-rays, because I am a fan of Westerns. I am a fan of Silverado, so I really wanted to have this in my collection, but I did not want to spend that much money on this 4K Blu-ray. This is something that should be about $30. The 4K steelbook should be about $30 because they didn't give you any new extras. They only give you a visual and audio upgrade, which is good enough for most people. They kind of lock you in with that steelbook packaging, which makes it a little bit harder to justify this price, because I would have just got a standard edition for like $28 and been more than happy just because they didn't give us any new extras. You know, I'm glad that there's an upgrade to the visuals and audio, but with the amount you're charging, I feel like there should be a little bit more there. So I can't say it's a perfect release just because of that price, but this is kind of what they're shifting us towards and kind of making us get used to these prices, and I just personally don't really appreciate that. But overall, it's still a great release, great visual upgrade, great audio upgrade. The film itself is fantastic, so it's not really a big negative. It's just that price, and with the way things are costing right now and the way physical media is going, you know, it's a little bit of a negative, and it kind of tarnishes what I think is a great release. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it here for me on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video if you could. We also have channel membership, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel, John Doe Juggalo, Harvey Scott, and Ben Rondo, you can do that, or you can even become a channel director like Nicholas Head, Uncle V, Frank from Frank's Media and Review, Stone Gasman, and Kevin Kruger, or you can even become a channel bankroll member like Mr. Smelly Potato. But of course, guys, if you have no money to throw my way, I don't mind at all. I just hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.